Dr. Andreas Muller is a professor of people management at Captain University of Applied Sciences. His research focus is on digital HR and corporate digital learning. His teaching comprises a range from leadership to corporate strategy and organizational transformation. He's a member of European EdTech Network and the Academy of Management. Andreas has co-founded two corporate universities, starting with Volkswagen Auto Uni in 2003, where he founded its School of Science and Technology. In his role, he represented Volkswagen's academic links to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in Boston, and he oversaw Auto Uni's activities in Latin America. In 2007, he became Chief Learning Officer at Erste Group and founded its Erste School of Banking and Finance with operations in 8 countries. He also serves as an advisor to international corporates and supports startup initiatives in different countries.
Hello and good morning. I hope you had some good days already with the HR week and enjoyed some of the fantastic presentations here. It's a pleasure for me to start the day. Nevena, thanks again for having me and for opening that day on talent, on change, on learning and development. Now, one of the major questions that's in the air, and especially now in these Corona times, is what is it that we have on board and what is it that we have to do when it's about digital learning? Now, don't want to focus too much about the difference on learning and training, because we all think that we're putting ourselves in the shoes of the learners and not so much in the deliverers of just some software that somebody has to go through. But let's go first into digitalization, that digital world, and to then see what that means for digital learning. Now, it is obvious that digital is key and that we are entering a digital world. We have entered that, and it's getting even denser and even more digital. What we can all see is that only the companies that are most capitalized, they are all in that sector. They are all tech companies. They are either providing services or products or platforms, whatever we have here. Now, what we can observe even is that even in the top 10 of the capitalized companies in the world, what we see is even there is split between, if you will, the first league and the second league in this top 10. The first offering us something that has a value which comes by these providers, be it a Microsoft or an Apple or an Amazon, because looks like that there is an original product or service behind that. While other companies, in particular Facebook and Google, they are more into the challenge that others are also interested in selling data of users. So they're not the only ones anymore, and that makes their position a bit more tricky. Because of course, it's not really for free to use Facebook. It's not really for free to use Google, but instead we pay we pay by data. Now, is it just a fad, or is it something that will sustain? And if we have a look into the last years and compare that with one of the major turns in technology and in business, say 100 years ago, then we see quite some similarities. So looking into the age of steel, when it ended and was succeeded by the age of oil and automotive, then we can see here that the top 10 companies in that time needed some 30 years to switch from a priority of steel into a vast priority of oil-oriented companies. We needed now only 10 years to make that similar shift away from oil and automotive, more into IT technology and telecommunication. So that seems to be not only a small trend, but more it looks like a larger societal transformation as well, an economic transformation. One of the persons who is stating that for a long time already is Jeremy Rifkin, which I take here as an example. Why he says so is that we have 3 large pillars that we all put these huge industrial, say, revolutions in, and that is partly through the communication technology that is changing, partly through the sources of energy that are changing, and partly through the mode of mobility that's changing. We observe all that currently in parallel, and if you see that compared to the last two larger revolutions, how does that work? Well, the 18th century, we have coal that comes into steam. Steam comes into either communication through the first prints, but also into the steam engines and into locomotives. The second industrial revolution then is based on oil, as we just saw. Oil moves either into plastics and into a lot of industrial goods, but also into our engines and brings us mobility up to now. Now, what's changing now is not only that there is a national driver, be it UK or US, this is more now continental drivers, but what also changes is that we have a globalized approach, which probably needs more time to be established. That's clear through the internet, but it's not so clear when we look at energy or when we look at mobility. The consequence is probably that we have much more decentralized energy provision and much more decentralized mobility as well. Now, that is happening, the question might be, if digitalization is around, do we have any scale to talk about it? And in fact, digitalization is taken in several contexts. The simple one is that things are not in the physical world anymore, but we digitize them to have some digital data available. A second step beyond that, that's what most of people are talking about when we are in digitalization, is that we're improving and transforming maybe into the digital processes, the workflows that are professionalized. The even harder and more surprising on one side, but also more beneficial step is when we are generating digital businesses. So that digital transformation includes, of course, quite some infrastructure that you can build on, but the step to walk into completely new or newly adapted business models in the digital world is a very strong one. Up to you to decide where you are in your organization and where you think is also your HR or your L&D department. If I think about now Corona, for example, we see fantastically how all our workflows partly are digitalized, partly are not even digitized. So that is quite a range that we have in many businesses and in many areas. So being in that shift between one age of industrialization and the next one, what we also see is, and some of you might observe that we have kind of classical customer-oriented strategies in different business models, classically focusing on processes or on products or on people. But now that is going into on a different level, on a higher level when it comes to digitalization. What we had as operational excellence earlier, which is focusing on the process, is now going into information excellence. And there are companies coming up like Amazon Web Services as a strong player that knows a lot about the stability and efficiency in global information exchange. Similar to IBM Watson, but there we would more expect then that algorithms, that AI is strengthened. A second pillar is moving from the sheer product leadership into something that involves also services. So that's more solution leadership. And you see some representatives here are, of course, Apple and Microsoft with all their environments, with more and more subscription services, but also Tesla. That's not only a provider of a car, but more a mix of hardware and software, which is updated and improved on the fly. A third pillar is the people orientation, which in the past has more been the question, how am I individually served? And that moves into collective intimacy more and more. And who is there? Well, for example, the one that knows best what we like to watch tonight as a movie, and that might be Netflix, but also Facebook and Google, who like to have our data and work with that, have ideas and projections. What is it that might be attractive for us, in particular for the marketing industry? Beyond that, we have a new form of play, and that is who is here to just innovate and do that in a accelerated way. Well, the two players here that stand ideally for that is Alphabet, as an organization that is built to generate business models. And the second is Amazon, without separating new businesses or singling out in the new companies. Amazon, mainly by the drive of Jeff Bezos, is interested to reconstruct itself week by week. And that is something, if you have the genetics of such an organization, you don't want to keep the business from yesterday. Maybe you are singling out the business only when it's a bit stable, like web services, but you're interested in renewing. And that is a different approach to the three mentioned. Why am I focusing so much on that digital strategy stuff? Well, you might guess when we're talking about digital learning, there is a link, of course, between what should I learn, why should I learn, and what is the environment that we're in as a company. So looking quickly at learning itself, you might also have fallen in that trap that I fell in for a long time, that we had a combination of different approaches on learning with that percentage of how successful is it to take this or that road. Well, unfortunately, it's a myth. So in 1913, we had an article that's more, well, it was a scientific journal, but it is more anecdotal that someone said, well, probably we learn less from what we hear and more from what we do. That kind of anecdote came together with the cone of experience of Dale, and then we saw people combining that and saying, well, the format, the abstract format of a verbal symbol is probably less leading into long-term learning than the direct experience. There is no evidence for that. Still, we're waiting for evidence also for the 70-20-10 model, but at least what we know, there is quite a range of different ways how we can learn. Why is that interesting? Well, as you all know, learning is not something that is just consuming. We have so many modes of learning that it's interesting to see, as learning providers, as somebody who's interested in let others learn, what are the channels that we can open here. And these channels are not only technology channels, they are also channels that come by people. So not only surely we have the course as we had it for a long time, be it a physical classroom or a virtual classroom, that is probably not fading out. But more and more we have different services that come also with different rules, be it the single resources in archives and the libraries, but also much more coming from social collaborations, from the exchange of employees, of staff, of people from different companies in the same sector. The exchange that we have in through social channels is something that, of course, is propelling learning. And the response from the different L&D or HR department should be also to design the appropriate roles, if that makes sense to the learning approach of that company. Well, learning apparently is something that all starts with communication. So what is that quality that we have here? We have a lot of communication tools with that. That's for sure. We have tools like nobody else before. But what are these tools good for, and which are the ones that you're selecting? There's parts of that tools that focus on communication, some on coordination, some on cooperation or even collaboration, and that's what we all saw now in that digital field in the last year, be it through Zoom, through Teams, or whichever tool you have in your organization. We all felt how it is seeing just that still image or that moving 2D or 1D face on the screen. So that's something that we all experience. There is enough on the tool side. Some of these tools yet are something that was not born for it, but they are used for learning. And Jane Hart is annually doing that research on which are the tools that people are using for learning. This year, no surprise, Zoom is the number one on that list, but others are there still. Google, YouTube. Who has not searched something on YouTube in order to make the next step, to follow what happened on that video? What we know already from Dale, that video and TV is something that helps us in learning, and is a different and maybe a richer part than just reading or just watching somebody else once. Here we have the moment of repetition. We can see in our own speed what is it that's going on and where can we stop and reuse it, etc. Now, on top of that, this is the user's view. We also have the offerings, and there's lots of edtech on education. Doesn't mean that either one side is right. So we have fantastic software, and we have meant for education and for learning, and we have fantastic software not meant for learning, and both is used in different ways. We did some market research some time ago, and here's an update that all the providers that we looked at have, funny enough, different mix of their learning methods. This is all e-learning, and what we see here is also a trend that maybe we can take up that kind of cone of digital learning. For that is a trend that no more the learning providers are offering only a still library of web-based trainings or videos, but more and more we have a mix of several modes. Some of them are staying on that no interaction part of the scale. Others are coming more into interaction, and some stay, walk away from that interaction, that algorithmic interaction, into human interaction, or back into human interaction. Now, how could that look like? If you take some Get Abstract, for example. That's a service that is meant to have no interaction, but just providing a file, and then you're reading that file and you know more. There's some interaction if you have questions in web-based trainings, or if you have MOOCs that enter one or the other question in it. And there's more. There's also this algorithmic interaction. For example, if you have Pluralsight as a provider that asks you actively to make your collections of creations, and then this can be tagged by others, and you can be promoted with your selection. So there's some social learning coming up there provided by algorithms. Another example could be the NEC apps, where you're just playing something, and the algorithms in the background find out what are the competencies that you're strongest at. Or game learning, where you're having a software that is a game, and from step to step, from challenge to challenge, you have to learn something. These are simulated challenges in the gaming environment at the end of the day. But we also have something like Nomadic, where you find a strong supporter of social learning, where larger teams, larger groups are invited to comment on their learnings, to exchange how they did with each other, to learn from each other. So not just to digest what others put on their learning path, but to generate something on their own in their learning groups, even if these groups can be quite large, like some 100 persons. Well, the next step here is what maybe might be misunderstood with blended learning. The blend still is there, but it's a different quality that I want to talk about here. We also have providers that ask us to put into the learning path some if you will, classical human interaction elements. Give me a call, or ask Peter to assess what I did after I went to that e-learning. You see, this mix between the virtual and the real world, that's something that this hybrid approach, more than just a blend, is something that comes up more and more. And you also find some providers here, be it in language learning or in leadership learning. And you also find something in coaching and mentoring that changes that mode between people interaction, real people, and abstract algorithmic coaching support. So we have a lot of tools around there. The question might be, what is it that you pick? Now let's go back to that ladder of digitization, with these 3 steps of digitization, digitalization, digital transformation. You still have the choice. What is it that best fits into your organization? Is that the virtualization of the classroom? So the first step into digitization, is that virtual classroom, or is it learning experience platform, which is a bit more than an LMS? Is it that you integrate some simulations where people can try out, predict and project something? Is it that you go for the social collaboration on a digital basis, sharing curations, for example? Or are you making that step into the digital world that you say, well, my learning takes place in 2D, 3D, in the full digital world, be it in the game or be it in these immersive environments where we can run workshops these days even? Well, the answer is, of course, unclear, because it's about your organization, your company, what best fits. But you might have maybe some examples for that, what helped others. If we stick to these three strategic digital disciplines, then let's take maybe one example for each. If you take one of the stronger German chemistry brands, then they were interested in efficiency. So they are a good example for the information excellence, that when they are efficiency interested, then their answer in learning and HR is to have one solution, one IT solution, one large library for all. And instead of doing more, they dissolve learning and development and say, well, that's why we have that software. Different approach, because different companies have different strategies. Works, for example, for Evonik, where we have a company that is trying to excel on their products and solutions, and so they do on their L&D environment. They're interested in involving the whole business, and the business leaders are taking part as actors, as speakers, as providers of content in their environments. Now, that adds a lot, not only to a learning provision, it's a whole learning culture that they're setting up by that. And they keep a lot of their courses in an archive that others, well, which is growing, that others can use, for example, for onboarding journeys, etc. A third example is now leaving Germany, walking into the United States. Let's take Bridgewater as a third example. They're focusing more on the collective intimacy. How is that? Bridgewater is a company that is one of the largest hedge funds in the world. They're interested in the smartest people that you can imagine. So what are they doing? They have an AI that is working on the recordings of important meetings, is analyzing that, finds out what are smart strategies that happen inside of Bridgewater, and give you a feedback as an individual, what is it that you can grow at. So the personal growth is something that Bridgewater is focusing on, because they're living from the smart people here. That is why the AI is a good partner for them, an artificial intelligence that responds and that makes you more excel on your competencies. So different strategies, different learning strategies, different learning providers and architectures. Well, and different roles. Now, the critical question that leaves is, and that's maybe not as optimistic as I started the day with, is how much can HR really make it? Well, we have an annual study here from University of St. Gallen. What they are interested in the German-speaking area is how far is HR or the business clear about the digital strategy. Now, the corporate digitalization is much better than the HR digitalization. And the optimistic picture is we're getting better over the years, but still 50% of the German-speaking world wouldn't say that they have a good clue of how to set up digital competencies. Well, that is definitely a catch that we have to work on. But now this is just the opening, so I hope there's a lot of ideas that comes towards the rest of the day where you can find approaches how to strengthen these competency gaps, and even more. There's of course some approaches not only from the European Union but other sources. So what does that mean now? What could you do in some steps to tap into your particular digital learning strategy? Well, first thing, where are you business-wise in terms of your digitalization? Second step, what does that mean in terms of your learning? Does that mean that you want to go full-scale digital transformation as the role model of the company? or is it that you have to catch up, or something in between? Well, then the third is, what is the level of interaction that's good for your company? Again, between not so much of a human interaction and more the algorithmic interaction, or would you say, well, we need much more human interaction? That's again a question of your organizational culture. Now, before you think we should go into architecture and infrastructure, the recommendation here would be, please think first about the roles that you have in mind. What is the different kind of communication that you should set up with the solution that helps your digital strategy, and then with these roles, going through the technology discussions and going through the future architecture. Doing that doesn't mean you're at the end. We know from agility, a retrospect is a fantastic format, but that would mean the whole story doesn't end here. Digitalization brings us into an ever revolving learning curve. So probably you then have to start again and think, does your infrastructure and architecture still work? And well, rework again, see what fits, and go your next steps. So I hope that is maybe helpful for one or the other in the room. I hope that the rest of the day will shed some light also on that transformational aspects, because that's what we are seeing here, that we don't have all the competencies in HR to make digitalization work. Seems to be something that is not really frustrating. It's just an invitation to do more here. But HR has to do more in order to understand, and also in order to lead others into these new fields in the digital world. So I hope that you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you again, and see you soon.